I was framed for adultery by my own wife, Sue Curson. When I awoke, I faced overwhelming accusations. Countless reporters thrust microphones at me, like bloodthirsty mosquitoes, frantically demanding why I cheated. My mother couldn't withstand the blow and died on the spot. I confronted Sue Curson. She sneered, clinging to her assistant Su Xingyuan. Who told you to call Xingyuan a homewrecker? Well, cheater, happy now. Staring at my mother's funeral portrait, I finally resolved to visit old Master Su. Mr. Su, after 6 years, the debt of gratitude has been repaid. It's time for me to leave. A clamor erupted around me. I tried to open my eyes, but the blinding camera flashes forced me to turn away. Before I could ask what happened, a harsh slap struck my face. Lu Wan, how could you repeat the same disgrace as your father? I looked dazedly at my furious mother, not quite understanding what was happening, then instinctively turned to Sue Curson beside me. Yesterday was our 3rd anniversary. Sue Curson had unexpectedly come home to celebrate with me, but I couldn't handle alcohol. Halfway through the meal, I lost consciousness. Yet the person lying beside me wasn't Sue Curson. It was Sue Curson's adopted younger sister, Su Yu. I froze in place, my face burning, blood rushing to my head as if the slap had knocked my senses loose. Reporters swarmed around me like bloodthirsty mosquitoes spotting fresh prey. Mr. Liu, when did you start having an affair with your sister-in-law? Were the previous rumors about your marital issues with Sue Curson due to your infidelity? The questions crashed over me like tidal waves, but I couldn't respond. Beside me, my mother clutched her chest, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of her mouth as she leaned against the wall, swaying precariously. Mom, I tried to rush over to support her, but the reporters blocked my path. I could only watch helplessly as her face turned pale, then ashen, before she collapsed to the ground. I no longer cared about anything else. I shoved everyone aside and lunged forward, but Mom's body was already ice cold. Call 120. I screamed at the crowd, but the reporters only grew more excited. Mr. Liu, did you anticipate that your affair would drive your mother to collapse? Was your infidelity influenced by family issues? Amid the barrage of questions, I could only feel Mom's body temperature fading bit by bit, until she turned cold as ice. I desperately tried to take her to the hospital, but I couldn't push through the reporters. I knelt and begged them to move, but was met with even more blinding camera flashes. My tears fell onto Mom's face, but they roused no response from her. Finally, Mom's breathing stopped. Only then did the reporters seem to realize what had happened, retreating like a receding tide. But it was too late. The doctor connected the instruments to Mother, then removed them again, saying gravely to me, Mr. Liu, please accept my condolences. My mother was literally driven to her death by me. She suffered so intensely that she even bit through her own tongue. When I was 13, my father had an affair and brought his mistress into our home. My mother nearly died from the pain then, but endured it for the sake of my youth. From then on, she was tortured by my father and his mistress until the Liu family went bankrupt. My father fled with the last funds from the accounts, abandoning Mother to face the ruins alone. It was the Su family who injected funds to save the Liu family then. Mother always regarded the Su family as our lifesavers. And now, I became the adulterer. Her entire life had been destroyed by a man's infidelity. How could she possibly accept her son, married to their savior, committing the same betrayal? I stared at my mother's corpse, her face frozen in anguish and fury, her entire face contorted. My heart was being torn apart, as if a blade were churning within it, leaving mangled flesh and blood. I felt pinned over a raging fire, my whole body burning feverishly, the world itself seeming to warp. Then a metallic taste of blood surged up my throat, and I violently vomited a mouthful of blood. The doctor rushed over to examine me, but I pushed him away and pulled out my phone to call Sue Curson. Where are you? My voice was eerily calm, numb to the core. After reaching the peak of fury and grief, I found myself devoid of emotional fluctuations. Even the excruciating pain that made my heart feel ready to explode left me without strength for accusations. Even someone as foolish as me could tell there was something wrong with last night's meal. The bar was bustling with a noisy crowd. Sue Curson, dressed in a revealing outfit, was straddling Su Xingyuan's lap. She held a wine glass between her teeth, pouring it directly into Su Xingyuan's mouth. The crimson liquid streamed down his Adam's apple, which seemed to ignite Sue Curson's excitement as she suddenly pressed her lips against it. Amid the crowd's raucous cheering, I inexplicably thought of my mother. The trace of blood at the corner of her lips before she collapsed had been similarly red, gradually darkening with time until it completely dried when we reached the hospital. My heart seemed to ache more intensely now, yet it made no difference. I numbly endured this torment, allowing myself to be sliced into 1,000 pieces to be torn apart. This was my deserved punishment, the bitter fruit of my endless entanglement with Sue Curson. The metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth again. I swallowed it down and stepped forward to call her name, Sue Curson. She turned around, those beautiful peach blossom eyes brimming with mockery. Oh, the cheating man. How does it feel to be cursed at? I asked calmly. Last night, it was you, wasn't it? Who else? You were foolish enough. I thought drugging would be harder. Yet you ate it so eagerly, wasting all my efforts. Why? Didn't you call Xing Yuan a homewrecker? Well, how thrilling does it feel to play the cheating man? I thought my heart wouldn't tremble for her anymore, yet now it convulsed violently. Doubling over uncontrollably, I crouched on the ground. My lungs burned as if about to explode, and finally, tears fell. All because of this. So she wanted me branded with infamy, wanted my mother driven to her grave, wanted my family destroyed. A wave of absurdity rose. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Sue Curson seemed slightly tense. Rising from Su Xingyuan's body, she sneered. Stop acting. Does it really hurt that much? She casually pointed at a waiter. Call 120 for him. Su Xingyuan, however, grabbed her hand. Xin, do you think Brother Lu Wen might be wearing a recording device? Did he come here deliberately to say those things? Sue Curson's gaze darkened. She stopped the server from calling 120, then circled around me. Oh, Lu Wen, never thought you'd have such schemes in mind. I struggled up from the floor. Believe whatever you want. I turned to leave, but was stopped by Sue Curson. Leaving? To prove your innocence with the recording? What do you want? I looked at her wearily. Sue Curson sprawled on the sofa. Strip. I'll let you leave when I'm convinced there's no recording equipment left. My mother's body was still waiting in the hospital morgue. I couldn't leave her lying there alone. I suppressed my anger, threw my phone in front of her, took off my trench coat, and turned my pants pockets inside out. Satisfied? Sue Curson glared at me with a dark expression. Not enough. Keep undressing. The crowd around us began to jeer. Someone aimed their phone camera at me. Swallowing immense shame, I removed my shirt. Are you satisfied now? Sue Curson observed my rage, as if discovering some perverse delight. Keep going. I stared at her through clenched teeth, turning to force my way out, but was violently pinned down. Squatting before me, Sue Curson tapped my cheek. Beg me, and maybe I'll let you go if I'm in a good mood. In your dreams. She killed my mother, ruined my reputation, yet expects me to beg for mercy? I glared at her with jaw locked tight. She grabbed a fistful of cash and threw it into the air. Whoever strips his pants off gets 100,000. The crowd surged forward like hungry wolves. Pinned to the floor, I drowned in overwhelming humiliation and fury. I gradually felt suffocated, my vision darkening. Finally, I passed out amidst a stabbing pain in my heart. When I woke again, old Master Su walked into the hospital room. He looked at me with hesitance, ultimately sighing. It's all karmic retribution. I gave a bitter smile. Old Master Su, I should leave now. Back when the Lu family went bankrupt and the empire crumbled, old Master Su had sought me out, demanding an arranged marriage. At that time, the Su family was embroiled in the scandal of a true versus fake heiress. Sue Curson, the true bloodline, had just returned to the Su family. Utterly ignorant of corporate affairs and social etiquette, she had caused quite a few embarrassments. Old Master Su wished to ally with an established aristocratic family through marriage, hoping to find a presentable husband who could uphold the Su family's reputation for Sue Curson. The Lu family was undoubtedly the best choice. Watching my mother's anxious face amid the bankruptcy, I chose to agree. At that time, Sue Curson and I shared many beautiful moments. I taught her her first waltz, guided her hand to play her first piano piece, and accompanied her to the grand ceremony marking the return of the true heiress. Back then, her eyes sparkled as she blushed and told me, Lu Wen, you're the brightest light I've seen since coming here. I naively believed we would continue like this forever. How could I not develop feelings after 3 years of companionship? Yet after marriage, she grew increasingly close to her assistant, Su Xingyuan. I asked her countless times, but she insisted it was strictly professional. The final straw came when I watched the video Su Xingyuan sent me of them together. Listening to her voice through my earphones, I asked, Sue Curson, do you know why I've always hated my father? She sprayed perfume on her neck while examining herself in the full-length mirror. Because he cheated, right? Relax, I won't do that. Then she walked out without looking back. Less than half an hour after she left, Su Xingyuan sent me a video of their passionate encounter in the car. Brother Lu Wen, your wife's perfume smells wonderful. That night I got drunk and confronted her, but she slapped me across the face and told me to get lost. You only stayed with me for the Su family's money too. Stop pretending to be so devoted. But if I really wanted only the Su family's investment money, why would I have personally handled everything for her and removed all obstacles? Old Master Su handed me divorce papers. Lu Wen, I've wronged you. The moment I signed the agreement, I felt the shackles that had bound me seem to break free in an instant. Sue Curson, we're finally done. I took my mother to the crematorium. Even with mortuary makeup, her face remained twisted in agony. Her most prideful son had committed the same despicable acts as his father. What a devastating blow this must have been to her. I knelt before the crematorium furnace, choking on sobs. If I had never chosen to be with Sue Curson from the start, if I hadn't fallen for her, if we divorced sooner. But there were no ifs, F'd. My mother had been reduced to a small box, light in weight, yet so heavy I could barely hold it. I carried her ashes to the South Mountain Cemetery, but the car was abruptly forced to a halt at a fork in the road. The driver glanced at me, hesitating. "It's the madam." Sue Curson leaned arrogantly against her car, rapping on the window. "Get out." Her gaze fell on the funeral urn in my hands. She sneered. "What gift did you prepare for your little mistress? So tacky, afraid she'll reject it. None of your business." I closed my eyes and told the driver to drive on. This enraged Sue Curson. She yanked the car door open, snatched the urn, and slammed it to the ground. "I fucking told you to get out. Care about this trash so much? Let me smash it for you." But the box flung open, revealing not the jewelry she had anticipated, but mere ashes. The wind swept through. I lunged from the car and crouched over my mother's ashes, desperately trying to salvage even a handful. Yet the gale was too fierce. I could only watch helplessly as the ashes scattered with the wind. My tears struck the ground. I wanted to confront Sue Curson, but my throat constricted, leaving me wordless but for choked sobs. My heart ached violently, ears ringing as if bombarded by thunder. I clenched my fists until my knuckles whitened, fighting to stay conscious. The world spun wildly. Everything before me warped and twisted. All I felt was the stabbing agony in my chest, each heartbeat like 1,000 cuts flaying me alive. I vomited blood that mingled with the residual ashes on the ground, forming a muddy clot of gore. Trembling, I scooped up the bloodied clump and pressed it to my heart. Then I turned and began walking toward South Mountain. This was the last bit of my mother's ashes. I had to lay her to rest properly, but the world before me blurred. Su Xingyuan bumped into me with a mocking laugh, knocking me to the ground. The blood-soaked mud fell onto the earth, and Su Xingyuan stomped on it. "Oops, Brother Lu Wen, what is this? I accidentally stepped on it. My apologies." I lunged forward, trying to push his foot away, but I had no strength left. The metallic taste of blood in my mouth grew stronger, and my vision nearly failed. Sue Curson frowned and pulled Su Xingyuan back, but my mother's ashes had already turned into a filthy sludge. "Mom, I'm sorry." I forced myself upright, looked at Sue Curson, and forced a smile. "Sue Curson, let's divorce." Then I collapsed, unable to hold on any longer. Sue Curson waited anxiously outside the hospital. Lu Wen hadn't emerged since being wheeled into the operating room. Su Xingyuan sidled over. "Xin, why don't we grab a meal first?" Sue Curson pushed him away forcefully. "Know your place. You're just a tool I used to provoke Lu Wen." After discovering the agreement between Grandpa and Lu Wen from years past, Sue Curson fell into a spiral of doubt. She began questioning whether Lu Wen's kindness toward her stemmed from love or financial motives. She became trapped in confusion and anguish, unable to discern the truth, yet terrified to ask, fearing Lu Wen might abandon her if the reality were exposed. This torment consumed her day and night. It was at this time that Su Xingyuan appeared. When Su Xingyuan first deliberately wet his shirt to reveal his abs and seduce her, Sue Curson spotted Lu Wen outside the office. His face wore an expression of agony. Then he leaned against the wall as if awaiting some final judgment. Sue Curson experimentally caressed Su Xingyuan's face, while Lu Wen bit his lip hard before turning to leave. This caused him immense pain. That night, Lu Wen cautiously probed her. Like a wounded beast in panic, he told her about his childhood, trying to retain her by exposing his scars. She had never seen Lu Wen like this before. Sue Curson became intoxicated by this sensation, Lu Wen's unprecedented tension, as if mirroring her doubts about his love, his anguish. This was right. Why should she suffer alone? Thus, she tested boundaries step by step, inching closer to Lu Wen's limits. After all, his mother regarded her as a lifesaver and would never permit their divorce. She reveled in Su Xingyuan's embrace, addicted to Lu Wen's torment. The thrill of infidelity intertwined with Lu Wen's desperate concern lifted her to euphoric heights, until Lu Wen completely shattered. That night, he drank himself into complete oblivion and demanded a divorce. Sue Curson was at a loss, but Su Xingyuan offered her an idea. "Brother Lu Wen is just bluffing. He's certain that you're the one who made the mistake, and since you love him, he doesn't believe you'd actually divorce him. That's why he's making a scene. Here's what you do. Set up Brother Lu Wen to have an affair too, then show him how little you care. He'll definitely panic. As a man, I understand him best. If you do this, Brother Lu Wen will treat you twice as well and never mention divorce again." But she never expected Lu Wen would instead become eerily calm, his entire being like a stagnant pool of water that would no longer ripple because of her. Just as Sue Curson was consumed by anxiety, old Master Su rushed over. "Grandpa, Su Curson approached, expecting him to solve all her problems as usual. But Old Master Su shook off her hand and handed her a divorce agreement. Sign this. Su Curson's face stiffened as she flipped through the pages rapidly. On the last page was Lu Wen's signature. Grandpa, are you joking? How could Lu Wen ever sign this with me? What about his mom? Does his mother know? Old Master Su looked at her with bitter disappointment. How dare you mention Lu Wen's mother? Didn't you just meet her today? Impossible. Su Curson froze, suddenly remembering the ashes Lu Wen had treasured so. Lemly, trembling, she turned to look at Su Xingyuan. Didn't you say that was a gift Lu Wen prepared for someone else? Speak. Su Xingyuan avoided her gaze. Curson, I only heard it from others. Su Curson lunged to slap Su Xingyuan, but Old Master Su pulled her back. It's too late for explanations now. Sign this and let Lu Wen go. No, I won't sign. Lu Wen will forgive me. I had my reasons. At that moment, the operating room door opened. Su Curson stared at Lu Wen in shock, barely recognizing him. His hair, jet black in the morning, was now streaked with white, resembling an old man's hair. The doctor sighed. Mr. Lu has suffered tremendous blows recently that he couldn't process immediately. But this is a temporary condition. It will recover naturally over time. Su Curson stubbornly remained by my hospital bed, refusing to leave. Old Master Su sighed deeply. You claimed you didn't know whether Lu Wen loved you. But how could you not understand? Haven't you seen how other business alliance couples behave these years? Playing separate games, scheming against each other. Which pair resembles you and Lu Wen? And what did you do? Dragging Lu Wen and Su Yu into this mess. You knew full well how fiercely he values marital fidelity. Weren't you literally pushing him toward death? Su Curson remained silent, her hands clutching mine like vices. Su Xingyuan, standing nearby, watched Su Curson's resolute demeanor. His gaze darkened. He quietly slipped out for a while. By evening, Su Xingyuan pushed open the door and handed Su Curson a thermos of chicken soup. XNXine, you should eat something. Otherwise, Brother Lu Wen will worry when he wakes up and sees you like this. Hearing my name, Su Curson's tightly furrowed brows relaxed. Without hesitation, she drank the entire thermos of soup. Then her vision grew increasingly blurry. Her whole body grew feverish. In her dazed state, she saw someone standing before her wearing Lu Wen's clothes, carrying the cedar scent he always used. Lu Wen. She reached out and hugged him. The two became entangled together. When I awoke from unconsciousness, the room was filled with a salty, fishy smell. Turning my head, I saw Su Xingyuan and Su Curson together on the adjacent hospital bed. When she saw me wake up, Su Xingyuan's face stiffened, yet Su Curson recklessly kissed him anyway. I forced a bitter smile, pushed the door open, and left the room to them. Outside, I encountered Old Master Su who came to visit me. He urgently asked, "Why aren't you resting in the ward? How can you wander around in this condition?" But upon reaching the ward entrance and hearing the sounds from within, Old Master Su froze in place. I said with a wry smile, "Mr. Su, I've decided to leave. Whether I obtain the divorce certificate or not, I don't want to see Su Curson ever again." Old Master Su sighed. "Where do you plan to go?" Haicheng. When Su Curson awoke, the person beside her still slept. Feeling the aching soreness in her waist, she meant to complain to Lu Wen. But when she turned her head, lying on the hospital bed was Su Xingyuan. "How did you get here?" Su Curson stared at him in disbelief, turning her head to look at the adjacent hospital bed only to find Lu Wen had vanished without a trace. If Lu Wen had woken up yesterday, if he saw them, Su Curson didn't dare dwell on it. Her confidence in gaining Lu Wen's forgiveness stemmed from his ignorance about her and Su Xingyuan having crossed the final line. If he were to find out. At that moment, I happened to enter to gather my belongings. Upon seeing me, Su Curson rushed toward me. "Lu Wen, let me explain." I gazed at her impassively. She frantically grabbed the chicken soup from last night. It was spiked. "I wasn't lucid yesterday. I thought Su Xingyuan was you. That's why this happened. Believe me, I was framed. This was the first time. I've never betrayed you before." I forced a sardonic smile. "Su Curson, do you even believe that yourself?" Pulling out my phone, I opened the video Su Xingyuan had sent me. "Were all of these also because you were drugged?" Su Curson flipped through in disbelief, looking at my calm expression, and suddenly she felt as if I truly intended to leave. Not the temporary anger she had assumed, but that I had genuinely made up my mind. I ignored her, picked up my belongings, and turned to leave. Without informing anyone, I didn't go to Haicheng where Old Master Su resided, but instead returned to Yunqing, my mother's hometown. After my father's infidelity, my mother and I had been driven out and lived there for a period. During those days in Yunqing, through countless tear-stained nights, my mother repeatedly warned me never to become like my father. Yet when she died, she was still heartbroken that her once proud son had actually committed adultery, and I never got the chance to explain to my mother. Life in Yun City passed slowly, where where my heart found long-lost peace. But Sue Kerson's life remained turbulent. Old Master Sue, worn down by Sue Kerson's persistence, eventually revealed my whereabouts in Haicheng to her. After Sue Kerson went to Haicheng, she couldn't find me no matter how hard she tried. It was as if I'd never set foot in Haicheng, leaving not a single trace. She stopped handling the group's affairs entirely, throwing herself wholly into searching for me. When she failed, she'd go to bars, drinking herself into a stupor, then repeatedly call my deactivated phone number. She was never groomed as a successor from childhood and only managed to stabilize the company with my assistance. Her current conduct has filled all company shareholders with discontent. Su Yu, the counterfeit heiress, seized this opportunity to rally shareholders and oust Sue Kerson from the company. Su Xingyuan was expelled as well. With nowhere to go, he attempted to continue clinging to Sue Kerson, but she now regards him as the primary culprit who drove me away. Sue Kerson had someone break one of his legs and blacklisted him throughout the entire industry, hoping to atone for her wrongdoings toward me. But how could Su Xingyuan be willing to endure such humiliation? He leaked all the information he had about Sue Kerson. Overnight, Sue Kerson's divorce from me became the hottest topic for paparazzi. Just like when I'd been cornered by reporters in that hotel room years ago, Sue Kerson now found herself hunted down by journalists. I thought I'd never see her again in this lifetime. Yet unexpectedly, Su Yu managed to track me down. Meeting Su Yu again, I felt somewhat awkward. Before Sue Kerson returned to the Su family, we had actually been classmates. One might even hesitantly call us friends. But after Sue Kerson's arrival, I sided with her, leaving Su Yu isolated from everyone else to endure endless cold shoulders. The only time I saw Su Yu afterward was at the Su family's recognition ceremony. Old Master Su formally declared Sue Kerson as the family's sole biological daughter, while Su Yu remained in the household as an adopted daughter. As Sue Kerson and I stood on the stage, I spotted Su Yu in the corner. She stood in the shadows, her expression unclear to me, but the overwhelming loneliness radiating from her entire being was heart-wrenching. Yet at that time, my heart and eyes were completely occupied by Sue Kerson, and I quickly pushed this scene from my mind. Never did I imagine that our next meeting after that would occur when Sue Kerson drugged me, landing me in bed with her. She was no longer the adopted daughter who could only stand in corners during the family recognition ceremony. Sue Kerson's incompetence had finally forced Old Master Su to reluctantly entrust the Su group to her temporarily. I stood somewhat at a loss, but Su Yu extended her hand first. Long time no see. What are you doing here? Grandfather is nearing his end. He wants to see you once. Though initially, Old Master Su had merely used me as a stepping stone for Sue Kerson's path, later even breaking his promise to me for her sake by revealing my whereabouts to her, he did ultimately help me through my most difficult times. I still decided to return and see him one last time. On the way back with Su Yu, I felt somewhat dazed. After the media exposure of us being in the same bed, my life had become too chaotic for me to pay attention to her. Perhaps sensing my thoughts, Su Yu pushed a coffee toward me. I've actually been doing quite well. No trace of her former helplessness and naivety remained on her face, replaced instead by an unwavering sharpness. It was extremely difficult at first. After all, the adopted daughter of the Su family had an affair with the real heiress. As husband, I became a laughingstock in social circles. But it didn't matter. If I couldn't break into women's world, then I'd conquer men's world. So now, I'm the real President Su. I took a sip of coffee. After prolonged consideration, I finally uttered that long-overdue apology. I'm sorry. Su Yu's face momentarily blanked. She lowered her head with a chuckle. You're the first person to ever apologize to me. Lu Wen, truthfully, I've always wondered what it would be like to hear your apology. After all, I used to think we were friends. Even, you were my first crush during my girlhood. She picked up her coffee and forced a smile. So when you stood by Sue Kerson's side, I was truly furious. But Lu Wen, I don't blame you. You were struggling to protect yourself, and I couldn't help you either. Back then, choosing Sue Kerson was your optimal decision. Yet I still appreciate your apology. At least it proves I truly liked a good person once. We both fell silent. Perhaps many things would have been different if different choices had been made. Like if the Lu family hadn't gone bankrupt. If I'd divorced Sue Kerson earlier. If my mother were still alive. But there are no what-ifs in this world. Su Yu pushed an envelope toward me. Maybe you should visit this address. There's a gift I prepared for you. By Old Master Su's sickbed, Sue Kerson kept vigil with red-rimmed eyes. All these years, it had been Old Master Su who cleaned up her messes, but now he could no longer protect her. Su Yu knocked on the door and led me inside. Sue Kerson's eyes lit up as she moved to take my hand, but I stepped back to avoid her. Lu Wen, you still won't forgive me? Old Master Su coughed once, signaling for both Sue Kerson and me to approach. He grabbed my hand and tried to press mine together with Sue Kerson's. Lu Wen, this granddaughter of mine is not capable. Without you, She cannot hold onto the Su family. Turning to Su Yu, I don't trust others. I beg you, I'll entrust the entire Su family to you. Consider this repaying your debt of gratitude. Help Kurson. I withdrew my hand. Old Master Su, my debt was repaid in full the moment my mother died. A bitter smile twisted my lips. You've already trapped me for 6 years. Will you continue to force me? Old Master Su sighed. Enough. He instructed his secretary to bring out the original divorce agreement and presented it to Su Kurson. Kurson, my final wish is for you to stop being entangled with Lu Wen. What I've left you is enough to last your lifetime. But other things you can't keep, don't force it anymore. Grandpa doesn't want to see you get hurt. Then his hand fell limply, as Su Kurson's heart-wrenching cry echoed through the room. The old Mr. Su breathed his last. When Su Kurson handed me the divorce agreement, she asked, "Is there really no chance for us?" I didn't answer, watching silently as Mr. Su's body was wheeled into the crematorium. After a long silence, I murmured, "This is where I collected my mother's ashes. Only, she never had the chance to be laid to rest properly." Su Kurson's hands went slack. She was luckier than me. Until his final moment, Mr. Su had still been making arrangements for her. But my mother, in her last moments, had hated me. Before leaving, I followed the address Su Yu gave me to Nanshan. The location turned out to be a cemetery. Su Yu was waiting before a grave. My breath caught when I saw the name carved in stone, my mother's resting place. I collected some of Auntie's belongings from back then and erected a clothes and hats tomb for her. I thought this might help alleviate your regrets. Thank you. I believed I wouldn't cry again. Yet now, tears still stream uncontrollably. After Su Xingyuan trampled and dirted that handful of ashes mixed with my blood, I thought I'd never be able to build a grave for my mother in this lifetime. But I never expected Su Yu to accomplish it. Under the sunset, she hands me a tissue. Perhaps there will be new life ahead. From now on, we all have new lives. I'm no longer shackled by obligations of gratitude, and she's no longer the Su family's